1979. One single night, and America lost its most powerful ally in the Middle East. Forever. But here is what nobody tells you. America didn't just lose an ally. America created its own worst enemy. With its own hands. With its own money. With its own CIA. The hatred between America and Iran is not an accident. It is not a misunderstanding. It is the result of decades of betrayal, coups, assassinations, proxy wars, and broken promises. And today, as Iran and Israel stand on the edge of full-scale war, as missiles fly and nuclear threats echo across the Middle East, you cannot understand what is happening today without understanding what happened yesterday. Who overthrew Iran's democracy? Who trained Iran's secret police to torture its own people? Who helped Saddam Hussein gas Iranian soldiers? Who assassinated Iran's top military general in broad daylight? America. And who funds militias across the Middle East? Who launched attacks on American bases over 160 times? Who is racing to build a nuclear bomb that could change the world forever? Iran. This is not just a conflict between two countries. This is 70 years of blood, betrayal, and revenge, playing out right now, in real time, in front of your eyes. Stay with me, because this story will change how you see the entire world. To understand one of the most dangerous rivalries in modern history, you must first understand something shocking. America and Iran were not always enemies. In fact, for decades, they were the closest of friends. After World War II, Iran looked at America with hope, with admiration. Iran was a young democracy, sitting on one of the largest oil reserves on the planet. Its people were educated, ambitious, and deeply proud of their ancient civilization. Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, was even named Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1951. He was a nationalist, a Democrat, a man who believed that Iran's wealth should belong to the Iranian people. And that belief, that simple democratic belief, is exactly what got him destroyed. Because Iran's oil was not just valuable to Iranians, it was valuable to Britain, it was valuable to America. And powerful nations do not give up oil easily. What happened next would permanently scar the relationship between America and Iran, and set the stage for everything you see happening in the Middle East today, 1953. The year American democracy died in Iran, Prime Minister Mossadegh had made a bold move. He nationalized Iran's oil industry, taking control of Iranian oil away from the British Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which is today known as BP. Britain was furious. They ran to Washington. They told President Eisenhower that Mossadegh was dangerous, that he would fall into the hands of Soviet communists, that Iran would become a Russian puppet state. It was a lie. But it worked. The CIA, under the direction of Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, launched Operation Ajax. American and British agents flooded the streets of Tehran. They paid newspaper editors to print anti-Mossadegh propaganda. They hired thugs and mobs to create chaos. They bribed military officers. They staged fake communist attacks to blame on Mossadegh's supporters. Within days, the democratically elected leader of Iran was arrested. He spent the rest of his life under house arrest. He died a prisoner in his own home. And in his place, America installed Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a king, a dictator, a man who would do whatever Washington told him. Iran's democracy was murdered, and the murderer's name was the Central Intelligence Agencies of the United States of America. The Iranian people watched all of this happen. They remembered every single detail, and they waited. For 26 years, the Shah ruled Iran with absolute power. On the surface, Iran looked modern. Tehran had 5-star hotels, Western boutiques, and universities. The Shah appeared on the cover of international magazines. American presidents invited him to the White House. He was celebrated as a great modernizer. But behind closed doors, there was a nightmare. The Shah created Savak, his secret police force, trained directly by the CIA and Israel's Mossad. Savak had one job: to silence anyone who criticized the Shah, and they were brutally good at their job. Thousands of Iranians were arrested without trial, tortured in underground prisons, executed in the middle of the night. Families were not even told where the bodies were buried. Human rights organizations around the world screamed. Journalists reported the horror. But America said nothing. Because the Shah was buying billions of dollars worth of American weapons. Because Iranian oil was flowing to the West. Because the Shah was a wall against Soviet influence. To Washington, he was an asset. To the Iranian people, he was a monster wearing a crown. And every single day that America supported that monster, the Iranian people's hatred of America grew deeper, darker, and more dangerous. Then came the man who would change everything. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a cleric, an exile, a man burning with rage against the Shah and against America. From his exile in Paris, Khomeini smuggled cassette tapes into Iran. His voice spread through mosques, through bazaars, through living rooms across the country. His message was electric and simple. The Shah is a traitor. America is the great Satan. The Islamic Revolution is coming. By 1978, millions of Iranians were in the streets. Workers went on strike. The military began to fracture. The Shah, ill with cancer and abandoned by his American allies, had no choice. On January 16, 1979, the Shah fled Iran. He never returned. On February 1, 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini landed in Tehran. 5 million people came out to welcome him. 5 million people screaming, weeping, celebrating the end of a dictatorship. The Islamic Republic of Iran was born, and America's greatest strategic ally in the Middle East was gone, replaced overnight by its most passionate, most determined, most ideological enemy. Washington was stunned. They never saw it coming, because they had never bothered to listen to the Iranian people. That ignorance was about to cost America dearly. November 4th, 1979. A date burned into American memory forever. A group of Iranian students, calling themselves the Muslim student followers of the Imam's line, stormed the United States Embassy in Tehran. 66 American diplomats and citizens were taken hostage. What followed was 444 days of pure humiliation for the most powerful nation on earth. Every night on American television, blindfolded Americans were paraded in front of cameras. Iranian crowds chanted death to America outside the embassy walls. The entire world was watching. President Jimmy Carter tried everything. Diplomatic negotiations failed. Economic sanctions failed. International pressure failed. Then came the rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, April 1980. 8 military helicopters sent deep into the Iranian desert on a secret mission to rescue the hostages. 3 helicopters broke down in a massive sandstorm. The mission was aborted. But during the retreat, 1 helicopter collided with a transport aircraft. The explosion killed 8 American soldiers. Their burned bodies were left in the Iranian desert. America had failed. Catastrophically. Publicly. Permanently. Jimmy Carter never recovered politically. He lost the 1980 election to Ronald Reagan. And on the very day Reagan was inaugurated, Iran released the hostages. A final, perfectly calculated insult. The message from Tehran was crystal clear. We do not fear you, America. We never will. But America was not done. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq invaded Iran. What followed was one of the most brutal wars of the entire 20th century. 8 years of trench warfare, chemical weapons, and mass casualties. Over 1 million people died, and America actively supported Saddam Hussein. Washington provided Iraq with satellite intelligence showing Iranian troop positions. American companies sold Saddam the chemical precursors he used to make poison gas. The Reagan administration removed Iraq from the terrorist list, specifically to increase support for Saddam. When Saddam used chemical weapons against Iranian soldiers, killing thousands in agonizing deaths, America looked away. Donald Rumsfeld, who would later become George W. Bush's Secretary of Defense, personally traveled to Baghdad and shook Saddam Hussein's hand, offering American friendship, American support, American complicity. Every Iranian family lost someone in that war. Every Iranian child grew up with a father, a brother, a son who never came home. And they all knew America helped do this to us. The hatred between Iran and America was no longer political. It was personal. It was generational. It was permanent. By the end of the 1980s, the foundation of everything you see today had been built. A destroyed democracy, a brutal dictatorship supported by America, a revolution fueled by decades of humiliation, a hostage crisis that shattered trust forever, a war where America armed Iran's killer. These were not small events. These were earthquakes, each one cracking the ground deeper, pushing America and Iran further apart, making reconciliation almost impossible. But the story was far from over. In Part 2, we go deeper. The rise of Iran's nuclear program, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the proxy wars from Yemen to Lebanon to Iraq, and the direct connection between all of this. And the Iran-Israel conflict burning right now. This is where history becomes the present. And the present could become catastrophe. Stay with me. After the Iran-Iraq War ended in 1988, Iran was devastated. Its cities were bombed. Its economy was destroyed. Over 1 million of its people were dead. But instead of offering Iran a hand of peace, America tightened the noose. Washington imposed wave after wave of economic sanctions on Iran, sanctions on its oil, sanctions on its banks, sanctions on its businesses. Sanctions designed to suffocate the Iranian economy and force the Islamic Republic to its knees. American companies were banned from doing any business with Iran. European allies were pressured to follow. Iran was being systematically cut off from the global financial system. But here is what Washington never understood. Sanctions did not weaken the Iranian government. Sanctions strengthened it. Because when ordinary Iranian people suffered, when they could not find medicine, when inflation destroyed their savings, when young Iranians could not find jobs, the Iranian government told them one thing: America is doing this to you. America is your enemy. America wants to destroy Iran. And the people believed it, because it was true. Every sanction pushed ordinary Iranians closer to their government and further away from America. Washington was not weakening its enemy. It was creating generations of new ones. And then, Iran made a decision that would send shock waves through every capital on Earth. Iran decided to build a nuclear program. The roots of Iran's nuclear ambitions actually go back to the Shah himself. In the 1970s, with full American support, Iran began building nuclear reactors. America even helped. Because back then, the Shah was America's man. But after the revolution, everything changed. America tried to stop Iran's nuclear development at every turn. In 2002, an Iranian opposition group made a stunning revelation. Iran had been secretly building uranium enrichment facilities, hidden underground, away from international inspectors. The world was alarmed. Israel was terrified. America declared it unacceptable because a nuclear Iran would change everything. It would make Iran untouchable. It would make regime change impossible. It would give Tehran the ultimate insurance policy against American military power. Iran insisted it was for peaceful energy purposes. America and Israel said it was a cover for building nuclear weapons. The truth was somewhere in the middle, and that ambiguity made it even more dangerous. The nuclear question would dominate US-Iran relations for the next 2 decades, and it dominates them still to today. Then came September 11th, 2001, and the world changed again. Here is a fact that most people do not know. After 9/11, Iran actually reached out to America. Iranian citizens held candlelight vigils for the American victims. The Iranian government offered intelligence cooperation against al-Qaeda. For one brief moment, there was a chance, a real chance for America and Iran to find common ground against a common enemy. George W. Bush destroyed that chance in 3 words: axis of evil. In his 2002 State of the Union address, President Bush named Iran, Iraq, and North Korea as the axis of evil, nations that sponsored terror and sought weapons of mass destruction. In Tehran, moderates who had pushed for engagement with America were humiliated. Hardliners who had always said America cannot be trusted were proven right. Iran watched as America then invaded Iraq, Iran's neighbor, and toppled Saddam Hussein. Suddenly, American troops were on Iran's eastern border in Afghanistan, and on Iran's western border in Iraq. Iran felt surrounded, threatened, cornered. A cornered animal does not negotiate. It fights back. And Iran began fighting back in ways that were invisible, deadly, and devastatingly effective. Then came September 11th, 2001, and the world changed again. Here is a fact that most people do not know. After 9/11, Iran actually reached out to America. Iranian citizens held candlelight vigils for the American victims. The Iranian government offered intelligence cooperation against al-Qaeda. For one brief moment, there was a chance, a real chance for America and Iran to find common ground against a common enemy. George W. Bush destroyed that chance in 3 words: axis of evil. In his 2002 State of the Union address, President Bush named Iran, Iraq, and North Korea as the axis of evil, nations that sponsored terror and sought weapons of mass destruction in Tehran. Moderates who had pushed for engagement with America were humiliated. Hardliners who had always said America cannot be trusted were proven right. Iran watched as America then invaded Iraq, Iran's neighbor, and toppled Saddam Hussein. Suddenly, American troops were on Iran's eastern border in Afghanistan and on Iran's western border in Iraq. Iran felt surrounded, threatened, cornered. A cornered animal does not negotiate. It fights back. And Iran began fighting back in ways that were invisible, deadly, and devastatingly effective. In 2015, something almost miraculous happened. After years of secret negotiations, the United States, Iran, and 5 other world powers signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The Iran nuclear deal. Iran agreed to dramatically reduce its nuclear program, to allow international inspectors full access, to eliminate 98% of its enriched uranium stockpile. In exchange, America and Europe would lift sanctions and allow Iran back into the global economy. For one brief moment, the world exhaled. Iranian streets celebrated. American diplomats celebrated. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee took notice. It seemed like 35 years of hostility might finally be ending. But the celebration did not last long. In 2018, President Donald Trump walked into the Oval Office, picked up a pen, and tore the deal apart. Trump called it the worst deal ever negotiated. He reimposed all sanctions and added new ones. Maximum pressure, he called it. Iran responded by restarting its nuclear program. Faster, deeper, and more aggressively than before. The one real chance for peace between America and Iran was dead. And with it, whatever small hope remained for a diplomatic solution to the crisis you see burning across the Middle East today. January 3rd, 2020. Baghdad International Airport. 1 a.m. A convoy of vehicles carrying Iran's most powerful military commander, General Qasem Soleimani, was leaving the airport. Soleimani was not just a general. He was the architect of Iran's entire regional strategy, the man who built the proxy network, the man who coordinated Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Iraqi militias. Iran's second most powerful figure after the supreme leader himself. An American MQ-9 Reaper drone locked onto his convoy and fired. The explosion killed Soleimani instantly. Iran erupted. Over 80 million Iranians were told their most beloved military hero had been murdered by America. Massive crowds flooded the streets from Tehran to Mashhad to Avaz. The supreme leader wept publicly on television. Iran's response came within days. Ballistic missiles rained down on American military bases in Iraq. Over 100 American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries. But more importantly, the assassination removed whatever final restraint existed in Tehran. Iran's leadership concluded, once and for all, that America would never accept the Islamic Republic. That America's goal was regime change, that the only way to survive was to accelerate the nuclear program and strike back through every proxy at their disposal. The killing of Soleimani did not make America safer. It made the entire Middle East more dangerous. And now, we arrive at today. Everything you have heard in this video, the 1953 coup, the hostage crisis, the proxy wars, the nuclear program, the Soleimani assassination, all of it feeds directly into the conflict you see on your screens right now. Iran and Israel have moved from shadow war to direct confrontation. Iranian drones and ballistic missiles have struck Israeli territory. Israel has struck inside Iran. Both nations have crossed lines that were previously uncrossable, and America stands behind Israel, with weapons, with intelligence, with diplomatic cover. For Iran, this is not just a conflict with Israel. Israel is the forward base of American power in the Middle East. To strike Israel is to strike America. To defeat Israel is to break American dominance in the region. That is how Tehran sees it. That is how they have always seen it. Iran is now closer to nuclear weapons capability than at any point in its history. Experts believe Iran could produce enough enriched uranium for a nuclear device within weeks if it chose to. The question hanging over the entire world is this: will Iran cross that final line? Will Israel strike Iran's nuclear facilities? Will America be dragged into a direct war with Iran? The answers to those questions will be shaped by everything you just learned. Because in the Middle East, history is never the past. History is always the present. Stay with me for Part 3, where we go even deeper into the Iran-Israel connection, the role of Saudi Arabia, and the nuclear countdown that could change our world forever. Here is the fact that will shock you most in this entire video. Iran and Israel, two nations that today openly call for each other's destruction, were once secret allies. Before 1979, under the Shah, Iran and Israel had deep, quiet, and highly profitable ties. Iranian oil flowed to Israel. Israeli military technology flowed to Iran. Israeli engineers worked inside Iran. Iranian and Israeli intelligence services cooperated directly against common Arab enemies. In fact, Israel was one of the Shah's closest strategic partners in the entire region. But the moment Khomeini came to power in 1979, everything reversed overnight. Khomeini declared Israel an illegitimate state. He called it a cancer that must be removed from the Middle East. He renamed the Israeli embassy in Tehran the Palestinian embassy. And Iran began building relationships with every armed group fighting against Israel: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Islamic Jihad in the West Bank. What had been a quiet alliance became a burning enmity. The same two nations that once shared intelligence now share only hatred. And that hatred has been building for 45 years until today, when it threatens to explode into a war that could pull the entire world into its flames. To understand Iran's war against Israel, you must understand Hezbollah. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon. In response, Iran sent its Revolutionary Guard forces into Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Their mission was to create a Lebanese Shia militia that would fight Israel permanently, relentlessly, and without mercy. That militia became Hezbollah, the Party of God. Iran poured billions of dollars into Hezbollah over 4 decades: weapons, training, intelligence, missiles, drones, tunnels, everything. Today, Hezbollah is not just a militia. It is a state within a state. It controls large parts of Lebanon. It has a political party, a television channel, hospitals, schools, and social services. And it has a military arsenal that rivals many official national armies. Over 150,000 missiles and rockets. Precision-guided munitions capable of hitting any target inside Israel. Anti-ship missiles. Drones. Underground tunnel networks stretching for hundreds of miles. Israel considers Hezbollah its most serious military threat. More dangerous than Hamas. More dangerous than any Arab army. And every single missile in Hezbollah's arsenal was paid for by Tehran. Every fighter trained by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Every order ultimately approved by the supreme leader in Tehran, Hezbollah, is not just Iran's ally. Hezbollah is Iran's most powerful weapon, pointed directly at Israel's heart. Ready to fire on command for decades before missiles started flying, Iran and Israel fought a shadow war, invisible, deadly, deeply personal. Israel assassinated Iranian nuclear scientists, 5 of them, shot by motorcyclists on Tehran streets, killed by magnetic bombs attached to their cars, eliminated with brutal precision. Iran responded by targeting Israeli diplomats around the world. Bomb attacks in India, Georgia, Thailand, Bulgaria. Iranian agents plotting assassinations in Europe, Africa, and Latin America. Then came the cyber battlefield, where the most sophisticated attack in history was launched. In 2010, a computer virus called Stuxnet was discovered inside Iran's nuclear facilities. It had been silently destroying Iran's uranium centrifuges for years, making them spin out of control while reporting normal readings to operators. It was created jointly by America and Israel, the world's first true cyber weapon, a digital bomb that caused real physical destruction. Iran lost years of nuclear progress to a piece of code, but Iran learned from it. Iran built its own cyber warfare capabilities, today ranked among the most dangerous in the world. Iranian hackers have attacked American banks, Saudi oil facilities, and Israeli infrastructure. This shadow war never stopped. It simply kept evolving, from assassinations to cyber attacks to drone strikes, getting more sophisticated, more dangerous, and closer to open warfare with every passing year. So how does this end? History offers us 3 possible paths. Path 1, diplomacy. A new nuclear deal. Sanctions relief in exchange for verified nuclear limits. a managed de-escalation that pulls both sides back from the edge. It has been done before, it can be done again. But it requires political courage that right now, neither Washington nor Tehran seems willing to find. Path 2, controlled conflict. The shadow war continues. Proxy battles keep burning across the Middle East. Occasional direct strikes between Iran and Israel. A permanent state of low-grade warfare that never fully explodes but never fully ends. The Middle East bleeds slowly, and the world lives with permanent uncertainty. Path 3, full escalation. Israel strikes Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran retaliates massively. Hezbollah opens a full second front. America is pulled in. The Strait of Hormuz closes. Oil hits $300 a barrel. The global economy collapses. And the world faces a conflict unlike anything since World War II. Nobody wants Path 3. But history does not always give us what we want. What happens next will be decided not just in Washington and Tehran, but in the calculations of leaders under enormous pressure, with incomplete information, and with the weight of 70 years of hatred pushing them toward the worst possible choice. You now know the history. You now understand the stakes. You now see the full picture that most people never get to see. In Part 4, we go to the final chapter. Saudi Arabia's secret role, the Abraham Accords, the changing Arab world, and whether peace in the Middle East is still possible, or whether the region is headed toward a catastrophe that changes everything. Stay with me. The most important part is still coming. To truly understand the Middle East, you cannot just look at America and Iran. You must look at the third great power sitting between them, Saudi Arabia. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Islamic Republic of Iran are not just political rivals. They are ideological enemies at the deepest possible level. Saudi Arabia is Sunni Muslim. Iran is Shia Muslim. This divide, 1,400 years old, runs like a fault line beneath every conflict in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia sees itself as the guardian of Islam's holiest sites, Mecca and Medina. Iran sees itself as the leader of the Islamic revolutionary world. Both cannot be right. Both refuse to be wrong. For decades, Saudi Arabia and Iran have fought a proxy war across the entire Middle East. In Yemen, Saudi Arabia backs the government. Iran backs the Houthis. In Lebanon, Saudi Arabia backs Sunni political forces. Iran backs Hezbollah. In Bahrain, Saudi Arabia sent troops to crush a Shia uprising that Iran was accused of supporting. In Syria, both sides backed opposing forces in a civil war that killed 500,000 people. And through all of this, America stood firmly behind Saudi Arabia, selling them weapons, providing military protection, treating the kingdom as its most important Arab ally. But in recent years, something unexpected began to happen. Something that is quietly reshaping the entire Middle East. And it starts with a question nobody expected to ask. What if Saudi Arabia and Israel became friends? September 15th, 2020. The White House lawn, a handshake that rewrote the rules of the Middle East. The Abraham Accords. In a ceremony hosted by President Donald Trump, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain formally normalized relations with Israel. Two Arab nations, officially making peace with the Jewish state. Within months, Sudan and Morocco followed. For decades, the Arab world had maintained a united front. No normalization with Israel until Palestinians had their own state. It was the foundational rule of Arab politics. The Abraham Accords shattered that rule. Arab nations decided that their future, economically, technologically, and militarily, was better served by working with Israel than by defending a Palestinian cause that had produced no results in 70 years. And the driving force behind this calculation was fear of Iran. UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. They all feared Iran's growing regional power far more than they cared about Palestinian statehood. And Israel, with its military power, intelligence capabilities, and American backing, was a far more useful partner against Tehran than an enemy to be boycotted. Iran watched the Abraham Accords with horror. The walls it had counted on, Arab opposition to Israel, were crumbling. A new Middle Eastern alliance was forming, and Iran was on the outside. Some analysts believe October 7th was partly Iran's attempt to destroy the Abraham Accords, to reignite Arab anger against Israel and shatter the new alliances being built against Tehran. If that was the plan, it only partially worked. But the biggest prize, the normalization that would truly transform the Middle East, was still on the table. Saudi Arabia and Israel. Before October 7th, 2023, secret negotiations were quietly advancing. Saudi Arabia and Israel were moving toward a historic normalization agreement. American officials were actively mediating. The deal would have been seismic. Saudi Arabia, the guardian of Mecca and Medina, the most symbolically important Arab and Muslim nation, officially recognizing Israel, shaking hands with Tel Aviv, opening embassies. For Israel, it would have been the ultimate legitimization. For America, a historic foreign policy achievement. For Iran, an absolute nightmare. A Saudi-Israeli alliance backed by American military guarantees would have created a powerful anti-Iran bloc that Tehran could not match. October 7th paused those negotiations. Saudi Arabia could not be seen normalizing with Israel, while Gaza burned on television screens across the Arab world. But the negotiations did not die. They went quiet. And behind closed doors, they continue. Because the strategic logic hasn't changed. Saudi Arabia still fears Iran. Israel still needs Arab legitimacy. America still wants regional stability. If and when a Saudi-Israel deal is signed, it will be the most significant diplomatic event in the Middle East since the Camp David Accords. And it will push Iran into a strategic isolation it has never faced before. That isolation could either force Iran to the negotiating table or push it toward its most dangerous decision yet. While Iran fights its external battles, inside Iran, a different kind of war is being fought. The Iranian people are not their government, and that distinction matters enormously. Iran has one of the youngest, most educated, and most internet-connected populations in the Middle East. Over 60% of Iranians are under 35. They grew up with satellite television and smartphones. They see how the rest of the world lives, and many of them are furious. In 2009, the Green Movement. Millions of Iranians took to the streets protesting a stolen election. The government crushed them brutally. In 2019, economic protests erupted across Iran as sanctions destroyed the economy. The government shut down the internet and killed over 1,500 protesters. In 2022, the most powerful uprising yet. Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman, was arrested by the morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab incorrectly. She died in custody. Iran exploded. Women burned their hijabs in the streets. Young Iranians chanted not just against the morality police, but against the supreme leader himself. Woman, life, freedom. The chant echoed around the world. The government responded with mass arrests, executions, and overwhelming force. The uprising was suppressed, but it was not forgotten. The Islamic Republic is sitting on a volcano of internal discontent, a population that wants freedom, economic opportunity, and connection to the world, trapped under a government that offers ideology, isolation, and repression. This internal pressure, combined with external military threats, makes Iran's leadership more desperate, more paranoid, and more dangerous than ever before. You might be watching this from Pakistan, from Indonesia, from Nigeria, from Britain, from America, and thinking, why does this affect me? Let me tell you exactly why. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, is the most strategically critical choke point on Earth. Every single day, 20 million barrels of oil pass through it. Nearly 20% of all the oil consumed on the planet. If Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has threatened to do exactly that, global oil prices would double or triple within days. Every country on Earth that uses oil, which means every country on Earth, would feel the economic shockwave immediately. Fuel prices would explode. Food prices would soar, because food is transported by vehicles that run on fuel. Electricity costs would skyrocket. Manufacturing would grind to a halt. A conflict between America and Iran would not stay in the Middle East. It would hit your fuel pump. It would hit your grocery store. It would hit your electricity bill. And if, in the worst-case scenario, nuclear weapons enter this equation, the consequences are beyond any economic calculation. This is not a distant regional conflict. This is a crisis with the power to reshape the daily life of every human being on this planet. Understanding it is not optional. It is essential after everything you have heard across these 4 parts, after the coups, the hostages, the proxy wars, the assassinations, the nuclear threats, you might ask. Is peace between America and Iran still possible? The honest answer is yes, but it is harder than it has ever been. History shows us that nations with far deeper hatreds have found peace. Germany and France, who fought 3 devastating wars in 70 years, are today the closest of allies and the foundation of the European Union. Vietnam, where America fought a brutal decade-long war, is today one of America's strategic partners in Asia. Peace is always possible, but it requires leaders on both sides willing to pay the political cost of compromise. In America, any president who negotiates with Iran faces accusations of weakness and appeasement. In Iran, any leader who reaches out to America risks being labeled a traitor to the revolution. The political systems on both sides punish moderation and reward extremism. But beneath the governments, there is a foundation for peace. Millions of Iranian Americans who bridge both cultures. A young Iranian population that admires American culture even as it resents American policy. American academics, journalists, and diplomats who understand Iran with nuance and respect. Peace is not inevitable, but it is not impossible. What is certain is that without peace, the alternative grows more catastrophic with every passing year. We began this story in 1953, with a coup, with a betrayal, with a democratically elected leader dragged from office by foreign hands. We end it here, in 2024 and beyond, with missiles in the sky, with nuclear centrifuges spinning, with proxy armies fighting on a dozen fronts, with 2 nations locked in a hatred so deep it has become part of their national identity. But here is what history teaches us, above everything else. Hatred is a choice, and choices can be changed. The 1953 coup was a choice. Supporting the Shah's torture chambers was a choice. Backing Saddam Hussein was a choice. Tearing up the nuclear deal was a choice. Building proxy militias was a choice. Assassinating scientists and generals was a choice. Every step that brought America and Iran to this moment was a choice made by human beings with other options available to them. And the next chapter, war or peace, catastrophe or compromise, a world transformed by nuclear fire or rebuilt through difficult diplomacy, that too will be a choice, made by leaders, influenced by publics, shaped by people like you, who take the time to understand history instead of accepting simple headlines. You now know the full story, the real story, not the version that fits on a television chyron or a social media post. You know where this hatred came from. You know why it burned so fiercely. You know what is truly at stake. That knowledge is not just information. It is power. The power to see through propaganda. The power to demand better from your leaders. The power to understand your world as it truly is. Thank you for watching all 4 parts of this series. If this video gave you something, share it. Because in a world drowning in noise, real history, told honestly, is the rarest and most valuable thing of all. And remember, the Middle East is not just a region on a map. It is the birthplace of civilization itself. It deserves to be understood, not just feared. Until next time.